Hi, this is Teresa Martin from Lower Cape TV, and welcome to this month's installment of Legislative Update. With me today is Senator Julian and Representative Sarah Peake. You're sitting in different chairs. You confused me today.
Sorry about
We
that.
rotate every month.
Yeah, I was like, wait, wrong face, wrong chair. Anyway, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thanks for having us back. It's a great opportunity for us.
Glad to be here.
So I think in today's show, we're going to focus on a theme of energy. And we're going to return to some of the topics we've talked about before, including our ever favorite nuclear power station. So I know some things have happened there, not so good things, and the shutdown's coming, and maybe you can give us a little update on what's been happening.
Sure. So, Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station has sort of been a perennial concern for those of us, especially who live out here. Always a concern that, from a safety perspective, God forbid anything happens at that plant. The real only opportunity, the option that we really have here is, and not to be facetious, but sort of the Swim East poster.
Right.
Give Susan Baker
Susan
a little
Baker.
plug, one of our favorite tour artists. So the Cape delegation, and prior to my tenure, Sarah's been leading this, my predecessor led this, really in trying to hold Pilgrim accountable. But now we're in this really critical stage where the plant is closing. It's going to close by May 2019. So we need to be vigilant about their activities now until they close. But really, this is this critical period moving into closure and then decommissioning. What happens now really is going to determine whether or not Sarah and I and folks down here are talking about this plant and are concerned about it from a safety perspective for the next several years or the next several decades. So the legislature passed and created a decommissioning panel. It's going to be meeting here. They've met for about 9 or 10 months. Right. They're going to have a meeting on Wednesday, March 21st, here on Cape Cod at Cape Cod Community College. I believe it starts at 6:30 on the 21st. And there, the delegation from the Cape and also from Plymouth and the South Shore are going to be there to present some things that we would like to see.
Is the Cape going to keep having a voice in this going forward? Because that was one of the concerns before.
Well, that's one of the reasons we're all showing up on Wednesday. And, something that's really important to highlight is it's not just Cape legislators, but we have Senator Vinnie DiMacedo from Plymouth, Representative Matt Muratori from Plymouth. I don't know if... now I'm drawing a blank on his name.
Coulter and Cutler.
Cutler, right. If Cutler are going to come as well. But there is quite a pack of us now that are united in this and share the same concerns.
And everyone's interests are now aligning, right? Because especially for the town of Plymouth. I mean, this has been an employer and it's been part of the town. This is also dozens of miles of their coastline. What's going to happen with this facility? And the decommissioning process, there is a number of concerns. The NRC has never had multiple nuclear power stations decommissioning at the same time. They're now going to have about 3 or 4 in the pipeline when this is happening to Pilgrim. Entergy, the parent utility that owns Pilgrim, has several facilities that are decommissioning. So we really have to keep an eye on them. I think the work ahead that we're, a preview of what's to come on this coming Wednesday, one, I think we need to make sure that we're doing a good job as there's a number of state agencies that have a varying role here. The frustrating piece, right, is that regulation and authority around the plant is within that fence, lies with the NRC at the federal level, but public health, emergency response, public utilities, environmental protection, they all have a role. Right. So I think looking at how do we convene all those folks at a table to make sure that they're doing that work. Do they have the resources to do that work? Really the critical piece and what we need to push the utility to do is to sign an MOU with the state agreeing about how they're going to do that. We may need to file some legislation to give them a helpful nudge to do that. If they don't, a gentle nudge. Right. If they don't sign the MOU, then we can take measures through law.
Legislative action. And a big piece of it is not only to make sure that our state agencies still have a seat at the table to ensure our safety and an orderly process, but there is a significant amount of money that is sort of off-budget money. It comes in to fund DPH. It comes in to fund MEMA and emergency management planning. Outside of the budgetary process that Julian and I as legislators participate in, I mean, it's a direct assessment that, boom, goes directly to the bottom line. If that goes away, that will leave a gaping hole in the state budget. And as a result of the gaping hole, either the oversight by these state agencies ends up going away, which is then becomes a real public safety concern, and that's another big piece of it.
Well, energy has also been in our face this week in a very
Yeah.
visceral way, this month,
Yes.
with storm after storm after storm and outages, 100% outages in the Lower Cape. So what are we going to do to fix this?
Yeah, so I cannot express the level of my frustration, I will say anger, at the situation that we have found ourselves in over the course of the last several storms during January, February, and now into March. I find it hard to believe that we live here in a first world nation in its 2018, and we have a power company that cannot reliably supply electricity to homes and businesses in a geographic area here on Cape Cod. And, Cape Cod yesterday was not just thrust 40 miles out into the sea. We have been a peninsula out into the sea since the glaciers receded and before Thomas Alva Edison invented electricity. But somehow they seem to feel that they can't. And it's my perception, having lived here 25 years, the situation has gotten progressively worse over the last several winters. So what can we do? Because outrage and anger isn't going to bring
Feels
about
good for a few minutes.
Feels good.
but-
We vent. It's what you go into the bathroom, you scream into the mirror, and then you move on. You move on from there. So some positive steps that we've taken already. We, as a delegation, have already reached out to the Joint Committee on Telecommunications and Energy, and asked the chairman of the committees to convene what's called either an evidentiary or a fact-finding hearing, where there are invited guests. Eversource, National Grid, because we can't forget about the islands, and National Grid is the supplier of power most days to Nantucket. I think DPU needs to be at the table also. And through asking a series of questions and really delving and getting into the weeds on exactly what it is that happened here so that we and our coastal communities lost power for days. And to your point, it wasn't just scattered outages. Oh, this section of Chatham is out because a tree branch fell across the wire. But major transmission lines coming down, major substations just fritzing out. I think that's the technical term. Transformers igniting on telephone poles, and in some cases, the poles themselves just cracking in half, or the top third of them, and coming tumbling down. For me, the amateur, I look at it and I say, seems to me that they're not paying attention to ongoing maintenance of their infrastructure. Let's wait for things to break, and then we'll fix it. Because in that case, we can take money out of a different pot of money and use the money that we have set aside for infrastructure improvement. Maybe some of it's for smart metering and battery storage and stuff, but that money that we all, as ratepayers, that pot of money that we contribute to as ratepayers, is supposed to be for things like systematic pole replacement. I think it can be used for a systematic long-term plan to bury lines in certain critical areas, for substation and transformer replacement. And the stuff that's out there is just old. It was very telling when the governor was down here, and we met with the Barnstable County Emergency Management people, and we were, I would say, up in their bunker, except it's on the third floor of a building, so I guess you can't have a bunker on the third floor. But it's windowless, so it feels like a bunker.
It doesn't flood up there, though.
No, it doesn't flood up there, which is
And it's on a hill.
Right, exactly, which is a good thing. So the governor in his musings said, I find it interesting that between Eversource and National Grid, over the course of the last month, by the time all is tallied up, there'll be over 1 million Massachusetts residents who will have lost power. But Massachusetts residents who live in an area where there are municipal power, muni-owned power companies, municipal light districts, not one of them has lost power. So for example, in Hingham and Hull during this last storm, I just talked this morning with somebody who lives in Hingham. There wasn't a flicker of the lights. And I think the difference is they're municipally owned, they pay attention to maintenance issues, and they're not, they're in effect a nonprofit. They're not lining their pockets with profit at our costs. So that's our plan moving forward. We'll see what comes of the hearing. There may be a legislative fix that we need to engage in. DPU really is the state agency that has oversight. we as legislators, I always hate to admit this, but we're sort of limited in our power to deal with them directly. They're a deregulated industry, but we certainly are keeping lines of communication open with the Baker-Polito administration, with DPU, with the chairs of the committee, and also with Maura Healey's offices as well.
What kind of timeline are we looking at?
Looking at a hearing probably late spring, early summer.
Before
And
hurricane season?
let's hope before hurrecane season. That's right. Don't
The
even
other
talk about
piece that I think is important
ahead.
is that getting, you know, from a county perspective and also from a municipal perspective, getting together and really doing an after-action plan around how municipalities can really work to nudge and hold accountable this utility. You know, I think I really have a lot of questions about, all right, we knew these storms were coming. You know, were teams in place. You know, were linemen and linewomen who did really great work. You know, were they actually out here, right? Remember, it takes, you know, it's at least an hour or two just to get here to begin doing that work. You know, so really from an after-action perspective, how do we really advance and improve that, and how do we hold them accountable? It should be mentioned as well, it was not just the power that went down, but also Comcast went down, and AT&T cell service basically was non-existent, 2-3 days after the storm?
That's right. So people were totally isolated, and this lack of cell or telephone service, many people have Comcast for their landline service now. Right. So at a time when people are running generators, when they have their wood stoves running, or when they have their gas fireplaces on, particularly dangerous and vulnerable time, and yet people are without the ability, if they need to call 911 to have the fire department come, or the rescue squad or something, there was no way for that communication.
And I also heard police stations had no service either, so they couldn't call and they couldn't receive.
That's right. Well, the police, at least, you know, their radio walkie-talkie system was still up and running. So, for example, that's how they communicated from the bunker to the various police and rescue agencies. But right, so the telecommunications piece absolutely is,
so it's
is
power
a big,
and telecommunications, it's all infrastructure.
It sure
really
is.
And
sure
worse,
is.
that we pay, you know, we pay more as ratepayers for our utilities than almost anywhere else in the country. You know, so and these sort of storms, right, are not. I think the intensity and the frequency of them has increased, and clearly, you know, we're grappling with climate change. We're going to try to do something about that more broadly. You know, actually, the Senate had passed climate resiliency legislation in November. The House had actually passed a bill sponsored by our colleague and friend Dylan Fernandez, who represents the islands, to tie Massachusetts to the Paris Climate Accord standards. And then the governor actually just earlier this week, actually yesterday, filed a capital bond bill for us to be making investments.
Well, that's actually a perfect leading, because we literally have 2 minutes left. So I was going to say, like, what are the other things on the horizon? Bonding season we're in, right? That's clearly...
Right, and on this topic, I mean, there's the short-term thing, but Julian's absolutely right. I mean, the long term is we've got to get our arms around climate change. The intensity of these storms is not going to go away. We have to reduce our carbon emissions, offer people incentives for renewables. Let's build out to its maximum capacity that offshore deep water wind area. There's 3 grants out there. We're going to award one of them a contract. The other 2 need to come online, you know, within a year after that first one gets up and running.
And I think part of you know, right here, part of the climate change conversation as well is really having hard conversations about, you know, there are some places and ways that we've gone about sort of doing business here, and I think we've got to have a real conversation, especially about our roads and infrastructure. Certainly each of our towns have been dealing with beach access just down the street from my house. You know, Boston Beach is something that, you know, that's very much
You're
changed.
waving goodbye to it?
Yes.
You know, and look, we're Cape Codders. You know, we're hardy, change is inevitable. We're used to sort of seeing this stuff, but I think that there's a role as well in really having that conversation about, you know, where do we have our critical infrastructure? Where do we build things in the future? And I think, you know, climate change is forcing us to have that conversation, and it's one that, you know, we'll need to have.
So a lot of wake-up calls on a lot of levels this month.
That's right.
Well, we are almost out of time. Is there anything that we want to look forward to talking about next month? What's the biggest thing on the horizon?
Yeah, so we're gearing up. The House takes up the budget in late April. We'll release our budget in mid-April to take a look at. It'll be time to file amendments then. We also have the opportunity to try to get some legislation passed, kind of attached to the budget. So, you know, we'll see how that provides certain opportunities. So we're looking forward to doing that. I think the House is going to shortly be taking up the so-called Airbnb tax bill as well.
Okay. Well, thank you guys very much
Thank
for
you.
being here. I appreciate it. And again, we've been here with Senator Sear and Representative Peake, and I'm Teresa Martin from Lower Cape TV. And join us next month when I know we'll be talking about energy again, about budget, and maybe about Airbnb. Thank you.
Thank you.